Welcome to episode 4 of Innovators and Creators. I'm your host, Sean Fry, Assistant Director of the Boone County Public Library. And today I'm out at Darkwood Farms with Annie Woods, and we're discussing all the amazing things she is doing. And so first, just give us like a thumbnail, like what is Darkwood Farms?
I started the farm 5 years ago. I was born and raised in northern Kentucky, and I had been living away from here for a while, 10 years, in various places. But I was living in Seattle, and I started working on an organic vegetable farm out there, and just really fell in love with it and really wanted to do it myself. And in my mind, there was really no other place to go other than come back home to start my own farm. And so Darkwood Farm was just sort of an idea of, I want to have a little farm where I grow organic vegetables that I can sell to people in the community. And I started out without even a shovel, and here we are today. It's a place that I've built to grow food, and it's kind of turned into an interesting project in connecting people more to the food system.
So it's starting to kind of go beyond.
Yeah, that wasn't really my expectation. I just was like, I want to grow vegetables, and I'll sell them so that I don't have to have another job to support my addiction to farming, really. But what I found, just kind of like you guys when you got here today, like there's a lot of people just connect to being outside and being in nature. And, I think people are realizing more and more how important food plays a role in, their own health, but also kind of the health of the community that you live in, as far as like, is the farm adding to it, or is it taking away from it? So
to go back to what you originally said, so you're out in the Northwest, which is just, it's hard to leave there. I was out there for a year, and I was like, but it's also surreal. I mean, if you're from this area, I guess you say the differences. So how did you go about learning? You had an interest, but how did you, I think I could support myself. I think I could,
I've always really been interested in, the outdoors and ecology. I studied biology and ecology in college, and part of the reason of being drawn to the Pacific Northwest is there's so many people that are really environmentally minded in the Pacific Northwest. Yes. And people are already thinking about local food and buying from farmers and all that there. And so I was kind of really attracted to that. And I kind of went from being like a backyard gardener with a couple chickens in the middle, my backyard in Seattle, to wanting to learn more and visiting farms. And then I kind of one day just was like, why don't I just go work on a farm and see if this is something that I actually really want to do? And I was hooked pretty immediately.
You realized that was. Yeah. And so your first farm experience was out west?
Yeah, well, actually, growing up here in northern Kentucky in Boone County, I worked at McGlasson Farms in Hebron down on River Road. When I was a teenager, I worked in their farm stand. So I sold vegetables, but I really wasn't involved in any of the
You're in the business end.
Yeah, it was just like dealing with customers and selling apples and peaches and all that stuff out of their farm stand. So, I had a little dabbling in it, and my parents live right up the road from here, and we always had a pretty big garden, maybe like a tenth of an acre in our backyard, so we grew corn and tomatoes and beans. But it was never something when I was a kid that I thought, I'm going to grow up to be a farmer.
This is it, right?
I came to it more later in life when I started understanding how important it was to think about what I was eating and where I was getting my food from, and just kind of weaving all that together with sort of, being somebody who likes biology and the outdoors, and it kind of all came together.
So how did you find, this site? Was this your first site, or did you have other sites you tried?
When I first moved home, I was on another property. Some friends of my family have property down in Bellevue Bottoms.
Right.
So I had an acre there that I was leasing, and I lived in a little trailer on the property. And then they ended up selling that property, and so I was looking for another place to farm. So I was there for 3 years, and then I ended up here because I am friends with a member of the family that owns this property. So, I would love to buy property, but I'm sure many people realize, acreage in Boone County is only getting more and more expensive, and it's really hard to find a piece of flat land to farm that you can afford with the wages that come with farming, because so much of this county is rapidly being developed, and flat land is great for putting subdivisions
for everything
on.
So
I'm kind of stuck in a little conundrum where I would like to buy land, but I can't really afford land because I'm a farmer, but I want to farm. And so it's just worked out that to this point, leasing has been the best option for me. So
now, how important do you think it is, or maybe it's not at all, to be living where you're working and to be on that same land?
Yeah, I don't think I would want to do it if I didn't live on that's part of why I farm, is because I can get up and be in this beautiful place and walk, and keep an eye on everything, and everything changes so rapidly every day. The farm yesterday looked different than it does today. We were just mowing in the cover crop. And so when people come out and visit me maybe once a week or once a month, they're like, oh my gosh, it looks totally different out here. And I just feel like to be a good farmer, I really have to have my eyes on the land all the time.
Right.
And part of the other reason that I do this is because I really love to eat and I like eating my vegetables, and I like being able to, Lindsay and I today were working out there picking some chard, and we just took a big bag of it, over and ate it for lunch. And that's part of it too, is, not having a.
So you experience that connection. Yeah,
for sure. I think it makes me a better farmer to be here and be observing on a daily basis, what's happening in the field.
So you mentioned to me that you have 1 acre.
1 acre, yeah.
And that you said you grow over 60 different crops on this 1 acre.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's constant turnover. We call it succession planting. So meaning every month we're planting something new. So I plant, let's say, some heads of lettuce in March. Well, then I'm also starting some other ones in the greenhouse at the same time that will be planted out in April, and then another set in May, because, it's not like you just plant the garden once and you're done. A lot of crops grow really quickly and turn over really fast, and so you always have to be replacing it with something else. And so by the end of the season, we'll have planted this whole acre. We'll have planted it almost 2 times. So it kind of makes the 1 acre almost 2 acres of vegetables, because, everything that you're kind of looking at right now, our spring peas and our spring lettuces and beets and carrots will be gone by the middle of the summer, and we'll put summer and fall crops in the place that they were earlier in the season.
Okay, and you mentioned, and maybe you just meant overall, but do you notice year to year some crops will grow faster? Let's say 1 week, or 1 year it's 6 weeks, and next week it's 4.
It really depends on what the weather's doing during the year. And every spring that I've done this has been different, and every summer and every fall. Sometimes you get an early frost in the beginning or middle of October, and so you're done with your tomatoes. That kills the tomatoes. Sometimes it doesn't frost until the middle of November, so you keep picking until the first frost kills it. And, this spring has been really quite variable, warm early, then cold for a long time, and then warm again. And so some of the things that we planted some things will just go past the stage you want them to be in and go past and set seed, if there's too much up and down with the temperature.
So then you just have to leave it for next year?
You just kind of chop it in and plant in the same spot and move on. Yeah, that's kind of the risk of doing it. You're really kind of at the whim of nature. And for some people that's really scary, but for me that's just part of it, accepting that some things are out of your control.
It's experience, right?
Yeah, and you learn a lot from doing it from year to year and paying attention and learning. So what are the crops that are really reliable? Which are the ones that are very sensitive to weather fluctuations? And then you kind of have to make those decisions about do I still want to plant the, sometimes it's like, well, I really do want to eat some really amazing lettuce in the spring, but I know it can be really touchy, but you still do it anyway with the hope that you'll get something out of it.
But the hope, the flyer on this. So is there anything that you've planted, let's say like one year and you're like, I just can't do that again?
Yeah. I mean, the first year I was like, well, I'm going to plant some broccoli and cauliflower and, cause everybody likes those and they're great. But one of the things that you learn pretty quickly is, like how much space and time do certain crops take up in your garden. And broccoli and cauliflower take up a lot of space. And they also are very sensitive to temperature fluctuation. So if it's cool in the spring and then it heats up really fast, they'll like not make a beautiful head of broccoli. They'll make these like tiny little flower shoots and you don't get broccoli. And then you're like, well, dang, like I just took up a very big portion of the garden with this crop and I didn't get anything out of it. So I stopped growing those after the first year, even though I know people want to eat them. It just doesn't make sense for a farm my size to do it. Bigger farm, you have more space. Great, try it. Or if you live in a climate like the Pacific Northwest where it's more mild all through the season, you can get a reliable crop out of it.
Because you can't, you're like at that point you're competing against too many things. The space, the weather, you're just like that's
but then then there's other crops that we can grow well here in Kentucky, stuff that likes heat in the summer. It's about finding like what are the appropriate crops to grow. And
you're constantly learning them. This is constant.
Yeah, evolution. And I mean, I have a lot of spreadsheets. I try to keep track of what has happened every year, how much I got of each crop so that I can make some informed decisions. So not just kind of looking, and there's a lot of intuition that goes into it, but there's also a lot of like data and record keeping.
You're doing both.
Well.
You're trusting your gut feeling, but you're like, okay, this.
Yeah, and a lot of people always ask me, like, what do you do in the winter, which is a very valid question, but it's like one of those questions that I hate getting because it's like, I don't know, people just think I'm like laying in bed all winter long or whatever, but there's still stuff to do in the winter for the farm. That's the time where I'm crunching all those numbers, putting my crop plan together, ordering my seeds, making sure all my tools are ready to go so that, when the winter breaks and it's time to get in the garden, I'm ready to go. And, it's a lot of times too where I'm trying to go to conferences or workshops and learn some more about farming. So it doesn't really stop. It slows down a lot in the winter. But it's also, I kind of compare it to like the opposite schedule of being a teacher. Like you're on for like 3/4 of the year, like hard, and there's no break from it. And then you kind of get a little break. For me, it's in the winter. For teachers, it's in the summer.
And that's when you do like your professional development.
And take a vacation. I can't go to the beach in the middle of August because that's
that'd
all
be
the
bad.
Tomatoes would just rot on the vine if I left then.
That'd be bad,
you can't the farm doesn't stop for holidays. People will be like, "What are you doing for the 4th of July?" I'm like, "Well, I'm picking.
I think I'll be here.
I'll be doing some.
I'll fire some sparklers. I'll have some sparklers in my house.
I'll see the fireworks from here. But
do you have? Are you happy? Or I don't know, happy is the right word. Is it an advantage then, not like having livestock as far as that's one more thing to...
Yeah,
you can focus on your...
Yeah, it's, animals, when you raise animals, it's like twice a day. You have to be there for them, whether it's to milk them or let them out of their pen or their coop or whatever and put them back in. You have to keep an eye on them to keep them safe from predators. And as much as I've kept chickens in the past and I love it, but if for example, I used to do a farmer's market in the evening. It's like, well, I'm going to be gone.
Right.
And so if the raccoons realize that the farmer's not here at 7 p.m., you can come home to a completely cleaned out chicken coop. And so part of the reason I haven't done it is just knowing that I can't be there every morning and every evening for the animals. But I have a lot of respect for people who do keep animals. And I think they're a really important... When you're running a kind of holistic type farm, animals are an important part of the equation because the manure and stuff is so valuable to building up your soil, and you can take scrap vegetables that are ugly or have bugs or whatever and feed them to your pigs or your chickens or whatever, and so you're kind of keeping it in a kind of closed loop, right? You don't have to buy in compost and manure. You can just generate it on the farm that
ties in a little bit of what you were explaining to me earlier when you were shoveling. You're knocking stuff out real quick while I stood and helped out, not at all. But that you were explaining how you I guess training the soil, for lack of a better thing, about like for water conservation, and could you just kind of explain a little bit about?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about when you're farming organically, a lot of people in their mind just think it's like chemical free, like you're not using pesticides or herbicides, and that's true. But a lot of organic farming is about you're building the soil because you can't necessarily feed the plant directly, like with a water-based fertilizer. You're kind of relying on what's in the soil to feed the plants. And so you're kind of nurturing the soil to do that. And so you want to be able to make sure you keep a good, even amount of water coming into the soil, that it's nice and aerated and turned over, but also that you're putting stuff back into the soil. Because if you're taking crops out constantly, you're removing all the minerals and things that are in the vegetables came from the soil. So if you take them and give them to somebody in Cincinnati, you're never getting it back. You have to get back. So you have to amend the soil with some minerals and compost and things to build the soil. And you actually are trying to promote life in the soil. So there's a whole ecosystem in the soil of bacteria and fungi. We see earthworms, we see little beetles and stuff. And all of those things are breaking down dead matter in the soil and making them available to the plants. And so if we're taking care of the soil and taking care of that ecosystem, the plants are getting fed. I had a farmer mentor who always, used to say, you're giving the plant a life of choice. Like it's got everything in the soil it needs. It's going to be a strong and healthy plant, that can kind of fight off pests and can fight off diseases, because we can't rely on chemicals to do that for us in organic farming. And so it's kind of like a very holistic way of looking at, I'm raising crops, but it's a lot to do with the soil.
It's a lot of thought. There's no accidents out here, right?
Sometimes you do things accidentally that work out or are bad, but that's all part of the learning process. So
I guess so and a little bit about the learning process. So how many years have you been at this current location?
This is my second year here.
Okay.
So I moved onto this spot at the very beginning of March of last year, 2017. So just been here a little over a year. But this I'm entering into my fifth year farming, running a farm on my own, and I worked on farms for 2 years continuously before that.
So is this site? Is it the way things grow? Is it much different here than when you're at Bellevue Bottoms? I mean, have you noticed
there's some differences. Yeah, the soil's different. I mean, the soil can be different right here than it can be on the other side of the lake.
Right.
Because the way that the soils are, and if you've ever looked at like a USGS map of soils, like they're just crazy. The soil was built by all these different outwashes and stuff from the glaciers and all these things, and so you definitely, when you're moving on to a spot to start farming, like that's a big component of it, is what does the soil look like? What am I going to be able to grow on these kind of soils?
And this obviously ties back to what you said when we started, because you're talking about Northern Kentucky and flatland being very, very difficult. So.
It's really interesting though, because I just feel like Northern Kentucky is such an interesting area when you look at the geological history, because we're so close to the river here. And we have all these amazing, like there's a lot of gravel pits here. Well, it's because all the glaciers kind of stopped and washed all these different kinds of rocks down here, and then the river was left behind when the glaciers retreated. And so we're in this like kind of really cool boundary. And people make a big deal about if you're from Ohio or from Kentucky, and I'm like, actually there's some like geological reasons for that. The soil's very different. A lot more of Ohio and Indiana and Illinois are flat, and Kentucky's more like rolling hills, and a lot of that has to do with the geology, and it also changes what you can grow here. I mean, tobacco was a huge thing in Kentucky, and that's because you could grow a very valuable crop on a small acreage, and that makes sense for this landscape. But, you go to super, super wide open flat field in Ohio, and it's maybe more suited for corn and soy and some of those things that you would do on larger acreages. So it all kind of like, what we're doing is sort of driven by what the land looks like.
So this is something that, obviously we don't rehearse our questions, but when they talk about growing hemp, is that is the soil good for that? Is that an advantage of being in Kentucky? Is that kind of along the same lines of tobacco?
I actually don't know that much about growing hemp, but there's definitely been a big push at the state level to make that something as a viable option for people as they're transitioning away from tobacco. And historically, a lot of hemp was grown in Kentucky. So to me, it would make sense that it's a smart crop because before we had all the machinery and the chemicals and everything, people were able to grow a lot of it here and make it work. I just personally don't know that much about it, but it's been interesting too. I mean, along the lines of hemp, I used to live in Washington State, and I left there actually right when they legalized marijuana. And it's just like, as a farmer, it's really interesting to think about all these different states that are legalizing it, either for medicinal or recreational uses, and like, how will that change what farmers are growing, and honestly, how profitable it can be to be a farmer. And I just don't think Kentucky's probably, I have no idea where we are as a state in that whole process, but I'm kind of like, something that we as farmers, I think, have to be paying attention to because it's a changing world and changing laws. And
well, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's not. We're talking the business aspect of it, and you're taking your skills and you're applying them, and I mean, it makes perfect sense on that. Like, and I guess I'm trying to transition a little bit too. Is that so? How did you go? Okay, I asked you a lot about like land and finding the right spot, but then how did you go about building your business? Like, how'd you go about like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to go about, because what you do is you sell to a number of restaurants.
Yes.
And then individuals. Those are kind of those are the two things.
Yeah.
And so I guess, do you grow them both kind of the same way, or is it just like the soil? You do each one different?
So going back to when I first started, I was unsure of what I was going to be able to produce. I was brand new to running my own farm. Right. And I had grown up in northern Kentucky, but I had been farming in the Pacific Northwest, and I actually worked at another farm in Petaluma, California, outside of San Francisco. So different climates, different soils, and I was just like, well, I'm going to go home to Kentucky. I'm going to start this farm, and I'll see what I can grow. And so to me, it made the most sense to just go to a farmer's market, because then it wasn't like somebody was expecting you to have a certain thing.
You're there.
Whatever you grew that looked good, you could take to the farmer's market, and whatever failed or looked ugly, you could leave it back on the farm and no one would know about it.
Right.
But one of the issues with going to the farmer's market is, are people going to show up? Is there a Bengals game that day? That used to affect our sales, or if it rains, people wouldn't show up. And so sometimes you'd pick all this beautiful stuff and take it to the market, and people wouldn't be there. They wouldn't be there to buy it.
There's more competition, as in other farmers markets. I feel like and I suppose that's a really good thing, but it's like people get divided.
It's funny because farmers markets can be really awesome, and the more communities that have them to be able to serve the people that live, in that certain neighborhood, it's great. But as a farmer, you're like, I can't go to 25 different farmers markets, So for farmers, sometimes having fewer around that you can focus your energy on and get more customers in one place at one time is a good thing, rather than spreading yourself too thin. So anyway, I did the farmers markets for a couple of years, and I really enjoyed it. And I met a lot of people, and I met a lot of chefs. And so it kind of naturally evolved.
So they're out seeking that product.
Yeah. And so a lot of the chefs that are really interested in good ingredients and local food are out at those farmers markets, seeing what's in season and meeting the farmers. And so I met a few chefs the first year that started buying from me, and that kind of just got the ball rolling. And then I kind of picked up more and more restaurant sales, and certain chefs were telling their other chef friends about me and my farm. And so that kind of picked up a lot. And I will say that the other farms that I had worked on prior to moving home to northern Kentucky sold to restaurants. And so I understood, what does the product have to look like, and how do you market it, and how do you reach out to chefs so that they know what you've got.
And this is kind of what you're talking about, the culture, creating, it takes a life of its own, because you're already running into people who are seeking this, and then they know other people seeking this, and that's a whole different business.
And so I always, in the back of my mind, knew I wanted to also start a community-supported agriculture program, a CSA, they're very prevalent like on the West Coast where I was living. Not that there are some here, but it's not as like well known of an idea. So the idea with that is that people will sign up at the beginning of the year and they pay basically to be a member of your farm at the beginning of the season. And that is a big help to us farmers because we shell out a lot of money at the beginning of the season to buy all of the supplies and seeds and equipment and stuff. And you don't have a crop to sell until we're just now getting to that point at the beginning of May. So you have several months where you're buying stuff and you're working, but there's no money coming in the door. And so having a community-supported agriculture program allows people to kind of pay up front at the beginning of the season to support the farm, and then their payoff is they get, when it's veggie season, they're getting really great vegetables every single week throughout the season. And I knew in my mind I wanted to move toward having that as a part of my farm, but the first couple years I was like, I just have to make sure I know how to grow good enough vegetables, because if people are expecting stuff every week, I have to have product. And I started out the first year I think with like 25 members, because I was like, okay, I can do 25. Like I had a little bit of experience under my belt at that point, and I knew I could produce enough vegetables every week for 25 people. And then I've slowly added on to it every year as I've gotten more comfortable as a farmer and with predicting like what I'll have and how much I have to grow to meet those needs. And so it really has shifted the first couple of years from like, let's see what I have, and I'll go to the farmer's market. It's no big deal if some of my stuff fails, to like being a little more confident in what I can grow and what I can produce, and then getting that support from people and knowing that I can produce some nice things for them every week. So now at this point, the farm has we have 50 members.
Nice. Okay.
And it's our community supported agriculture program. The first box of veggies will go out next week. And it'll go all the way through the beginning of November.
And that's you personally delivering them all, or?
Yeah. So the way that it works is we pack the boxes here, and then we have some neighborhood locations around Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. And so then they come and pick up their box. They have like 4 hours. If they pick up on a Thursday, they know they have from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. to go get their box. And normally it's like the home of one of our CSA members. Either they'll say, you can use my porch as a pickup spot, or some of the restaurants that we work with also allow us to drop the boxes up there and
they want that connection too. They want,
absolutely.
And they meeting other people and
for sure. And I mean, it's really fun too to be able to let people know which restaurants are supporting our farm too by buying from us every week, because some people might not want a box of vegetables every week. That might be kind of overwhelming for them, but they want to support the farm in some way. And I'm like, well, you can just choose to go to a certain restaurant that buys from us as well. That's one way of supporting us. And it's really fun to see how our food gets transformed into these like really beautiful dishes at certain places. And some places are fancier and some places are not. It's really cool to see how different chefs approach like using the food on their menus. So
that is exciting. So I guess your two groups that are purchasing so they want the same things, or
so like for the CSA you have to really have a diversity of things, because nobody wants to get the same thing every week. I mean, like, unless you you eat like 2 heads of lettuce every week or something, you kind of want something different from week to week. So you can be cooking different meals. And honestly, the way the seasons are here, we have different crops in the spring than we do the summer, than we do the fall. And so
you're providing a lot of variety, just seasonal.
Yes. Yeah. Every box that the people get, it's like normally, depending on the season, it might be 6 to 9 different items in there. And I also give them I send an email every week saying this is what you get, and these are the different things that you can. Here's some different recipe ideas of ways that you can put these ingredients together. But for the restaurants, some of them want consistency every week. They want our salad mix every week because that's their salad that they put out. But some of the restaurants really want whatever's at the peak of the season, because they want to do a special, they do different specials every week. So for the CSA, now knowing I have 50 members, I know that whatever I plant, if it's going to go in the CSA, I have to be able to get like 50 portions out of that planting. And the restaurants are a little bit more like the farmer's market, in that you can just be like, hey, this is what we have right now. What do you want?
They'll take that as a challenge.
Yeah.
What can I cook with this? And I'll show you.
Yeah, I think that drives some of the chefs are very creative people, you know, it's in my experience, and that they like the creative challenge of being like, oh, what do I have right now? What can I put together to make something really delicious?
Sounds like a Food Network show in the makings.
I know.
This is what it is this week. This is what we got. We'll bring them out here, this beautiful location. So I guess kind of like, so you've gone this far. You kind of had that vision. You're following your passion.
Yeah.
You enjoy this.
Yeah.
Because you got to love this. It's a grind, I'm sure, some days. You know what I mean? Like, you love it. So where do you see this going beyond what you have now? Or are you just like, hey, 50 people and a really good, doing the best I can with these restaurants. I'm in a good place. Or what do you want for next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to like take over the world or anything.
1 acre at a time.
100 acres. I really like having a farm that's like a manageable size that I can see everything.
What is manageable then for you?
I mean, for me, I really like the 1 acre.
Okay.
And it's like a nice round number, and I just would like to see more people feeling like they could do something like this as well. Whether it's just you're growing at home or it's somebody who's interested in farming that wants to be inspired to start their own farm. Like, it is really hard work, but it's not, I think people get in mind that you have to have a giant piece of land and giant pieces of equipment, and you don't. I mean, you can grow a lot of food on a very small parcel of land, and so I'm not necessarily like somebody who thinks about 5-year plans or 10-year plans or anything. So I don't quite know like where the farm will be in that time period. But I kind of like where we are now. I'm trying to grow as much as I possibly can on 1 acre. That's my challenge. I'm not trying to expand acreage at this point. But it's been really fun in my journey of doing this, seeing other people come out here and be inspired by just seeing the farm and sort of feeling empowered that they could also grow some food. And so I'm kind of thinking, that's kind of the next step in my journey is like, how do we expose more people to like how to start your own farm or how to grow food. And, I think it's pretty apparent that, the number of farmland acres we have in this country are rapidly decreasing. The number of farmers we have is rapidly decreasing, and the age of the average farmer is going up and up. And so I think if we want to produce our own food in our own communities, in our own country, like we have to inspire some younger people to get into farming and growing food.
So someone watching this and inspired by such, what is, I guess, I suppose the easiest isn't the right word, but what is the easiest way to get involved in and to try it out for yourself?
I think that the best way to learn is to go work on a farm. And it's a little bit of a safety net in that you can learn from a farmer and kind of learn about it and see if it's like the right fit for you. I mean, it's almost like the old time like apprentice model, right? Like you're going and you're just working really hard for somebody who knows what they're doing and learning that way.
Learning a trade.
Yeah, and there are, the surprising thing is like when I was in college, you never heard of like sustainable agriculture programs, but now a lot of schools are developing curriculum or even majors around sustainable agriculture. And like, you can go to UK, you can go to some of these other schools and you can learn about it in a school setting. But I think that it has to be definitely complemented with like hands-on experience. So is there,
that you've witnessed, is there like I don't want to say going away from like large corporate farms, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but like to encourage that, it's okay to be on 5 acres or 3 acres, or it doesn't need to be a 700 acre site with, it's this can be done here.
I think so, and I think we have like short-term memory loss a little bit too, because if you go, actually I was in the main library a couple of years ago, and it's funny, I walked past this like Boone County shelf of Boone County books or whatever, and there was like I think it was like an 1890 census of Boone County, and I was like, I just want to look in here, and I'm sure I'll see some last names that I know, families that have been here for a long time. And the surprising thing to me was, it shows what everybody's occupation is. And, you're in maybe downtown historic Burlington and there's some like merchants and bankers and doctors, but as it moves away from those little city centers, everybody that lived here was a farmer. They were like doing sustenance farming. Everybody had a little you know, their family lived on a farm and raised food. And we're not that many generations past from when people were doing this just to live or to make a little bit of money. And it's just been in the last handful of decades that we've had farming has been done more on like a larger scale as we've developed technology to be able to do that. So I think in some ways what I'm doing isn't like groundbreaking. It's just kind of hearkening back to something that people used to do all the time. But so I think there's a lot to learn from history, but like, you know, it's just not something that we necessarily see on the landscape every day, just driving down the road. And I think pushing yourself, if it's something you're interested in doing, like pushing yourself to get out and visit some farms at whatever size scale, you know, you're interested in, because we're lucky where we live. There's kind of a mix of it all. And you can get out and drive in a day to a small family farm, you know, or a larger farm or whatever. So I was definitely inspired with this like 1890 census being like, this used to be like a county of farmers, you know.
I don't know if we've had a lot of people inspired by a census, so I like hearing that. I mean, we research and we learn a lot, but you know, you're like, I'm fired up. I gotta do this now.
This is cool. Like, you know.
Well, that's like looking at old maps. You know, you see the big, large acreage that people had and stuff like that, and you're like, what did you do with all that? The little dots,
like where the houses used to be too, and you know, I mean. I was reading a statistic somewhere that like less than one, you know, in the modern census, you know, less than 1% of people are farmers now.
Right.
And it used to be a large majority of people were farmers.
It's that disconnect too.
Yeah.
And so it's.
And I understand it because it's not an easy way to make money. And a lot of farmers don't make money. They're just doing it to hold on to their farm, you know? And
you and I talked a little bit though about kind of we'll say genius of your land here, where you have many options to make you resilient to negative downturns that could really hurt someone who's in farming for a living, and referring to irrigation and then also teaching the crops to be resilient on their own too. So it's all that pays off.
And growing a diversity of crops so that if one thing fails, you're not totally... You haven't shot yourself in the foot, you know? Yeah. And that's a lesson that I've taken from nature, you know, like studying biology and ecology. Diverse ecosystems are very resilient to change. You know, it's when you have a monoculture, you know, or like just one thing growing, you know, if the right disease comes in or a major weather event or something, it can wipe the whole thing out. And so just being diverse is a way of being resilient to change and dealing with, you know, any unexpected things that come up. And, you know, you can apply that to a farm. You can apply that to businesses. You know, I mean, people about like investing money, diversify your portfolio. It's like, it's the same kind of across, you know. Across the board.
Before we wrap up, could you just explain a little bit kind of like, what you have on your site here? So I guess looking around, what we'd see, and because I think it's kind of ingenious, all the stuff that you've brought and you know that you needed. So what do we have here at your and you always say 1 acre, by the way, like it's like this real small, like I guess theoretically it sounds small until you look at it and you're like, wow, that's a lot for 1 acre. You know?
Well, okay, so the basics, if you're going to set up your own farm, the very first year I purchased the parts to put up the greenhouse, which you might be, I think you can see in the video there. So that's so that I can start my own plants in there. And then behind us, which you can't see, is a refrigerator, and it's actually a trailer on wheels that's insulated and refrigerated. And so part of being a tenant farmer, leasing land is everything that I bought in my mind needed to be mobile. In case I needed to move to a new property. So having a refrigerator on wheels was a good idea now.
When I think of transient, I often don't think of a greenhouse and a moving refrigerator. That
greenhouse can be pulled, right? I mean, you can take it apart. We did. I moved it from the old farm I was leasing to this one. So take it down in a couple of hours and then put it up in a day. And So yeah, and that so I have a shed now for storage, and that's also
getting kind of highfalutin now. You got your own shed. I mean, you're getting kind of big here.
Yeah, but it's not attached to the ground.
I can also pick this up too.
You can put it on the back of a truck and take it somewhere.
We'll put you on a barge. We'll float you.
Yeah, and then of course there's like what equipment are you going to use to work the soil? And actually, I don't know if you can catch it in the video, but that's my tractor. That little 2-wheel tractor right there. That's what we use to turn the soil on this acre. So 2 wheels and 2 feet.
And you're telling me you have 2 employees.
Yeah. So
that's really exciting.
Yeah. So Lindsay's working here March through November. And then I hired a summer helper college student to help us in the busy part of the season. I should mention that when I started the farm, when I moved home to Northern Kentucky, it was like the very beginning of 2014. And I was like, I'm going to do this by myself. You know, I can do it. It's a small farm. And I did do everything myself, although I had a lot of support from my parents and my family who were really excited for me to move home after living away for several years. And they were just like ready to help me with whatever. And then I had a really, really good friend who called me a couple months after I moved home to start the farm. And he was like, I'm so sick of my office job. I miss being outside. Can I come? I know you're starting your farm and you need help. Can I come help you?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, please. Because I had this idea I could do it all by myself. And I realized it was much easier having somebody to help. And so he was inspired to come help just to learn more about growing food, but just to be outside. And so he moved to Northern Kentucky to help me for the summer is what he thought. And he ended up liking it so much that he stayed and farmed with me for 4 years. And he just moved home this season. He's from Utah.
Okay.
His name's Chris Piper. And he moved home to Utah to start his own farm. So, you know, it's really exciting. I miss him, of course. He's a dear friend of mine. But I'm so excited that that whole experience was inspirational enough that he decided he was going to start his own farm on his family's land. And, you know, we keep up by phone, but, you know, one of the great things about social media is you can see photos of what other people are doing. And I like to follow a lot of farms. And, you know, he has a Instagram and Facebook or whatever for his farm. And so getting to see pictures of what's happening out at his farm. And he just picked some of his first vegetables of the season. So
you're like proud, right?
Really cool. I am, and I'm proud of him. And you know, you asked me a little bit ago, well, like the future, like what's next or the future of the farm, and it's like I said, it's exciting to think about not only what we can grow here, but like how can doing this inspire other people to
so there's a teaching mission
to do it. Yeah. My mom was a teacher. I don't think I ever thought I would like be a teacher, and it's a teacher maybe in a different way.
Right, yeah.
But I'm also like very open about like this is only my 5th year running a farm, so I'm still learning a lot too. So I can teach some stuff, but part of this is just trying things and messing up and learning from those mistakes.
But that's part of it too, is that you're not at a point where you think you know it all, right? You're like, I know I'm still, you know, and no matter what age you are, you know, no matter how long you've done something, it's like where you're open to that, that creativity that's out there, you know, like, I could learn to do this, or I could take this or something like that.
And that's part of the fun of it, right? It's like not every day is different. There's always a new challenge, you know, and if it's not like a challenge of like learning how to do something for the first time, it's a challenge of like, what did the, you know, like we had a storm the other day that we had hail and, you know, it damaged some leafy greens and stuff. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now I got to think about hail and like that as a factor, you know, so.
I'd almost think some of your chefs would want to buy that just for the novelty of the storm hits on a Tuesday and you're eating it on Wednesday or something like, here's a challenge. It's been chopped up, you know, like, you know, what can you do?
To be honest, the chefs are really like very, and our CSA members are really like, forgiving, and they understand as long as like we communicate with them. Like, hey,
it's almost part of the experience, though, right? I mean, it's
you're
not getting these. It's not manufactured. You're not getting something that's all the same. It's not the same,
right?
It's
and you're invested in. You know, I mean, I feel like those people are invested in what we do on the farm, and they understand that I can't control hail, right? But it's like, oh, so you need to move some lettuce, like we'll help you out, you know, and it's like the true sense of like what the word community means. Like, you know, I feel supported in many ways by the people that.
Do they come out here? Have you had them?
Yeah, I've had some chefs out here to see the farm, and a lot of them really like it. And I've had
that's kind of cool. They're taking it that serious too. Like, well, we can tell you where we got it from.
Yeah, I've had a lot of more requests for people to come out here, and I really love that aspect of it. But being such a small work crew, and we're like at the busy point of the season, I'm like, maybe I just need to like have a tour day rather than doing it like 10 different times over and over again. So, and like you guys have experienced, it's a really beautiful place to come out to and just spend some time.
It's inspiring. So, I mean, you just walk and you're like, wow. It's just kind of
I know, and we're like tucked up here behind like a fisherman's bar and stuff too. People are like, where?
Oh, I think that adds to it, by the way. I think that adds to the whole experience because we're driving through and we're like, are we in the right?
Yeah.
Let's find out, you know, and we see you like from that's got to be her, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that's part of the whole experience that people want, like. You know, I think if you're out just, I don't know, it was more obvious to take away some of the fun.
And I don't know if we mentioned that on camera or not, but it's the land that I am renting. There's also a pay fishing lake here. And so there's like, it's another business. And so it's really fun getting to see some of the fishermen come out here and they're like, what are you doing?
What is going on out here? Yeah. So they're here a few days a week and then you're doing your thing all the time. So, well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to show us around and tell us, and it's exciting. It is beautiful, and so thank you so much.
It was fun, and when you guys reached out, I was excited because I love our library system here in Boone County, and anything I can do to help you guys out too. I mean, I definitely since I started farming, you know, like it's a great resource. I go and pick up books, but
we got a lot of census stuff if you want.
Yeah,
you know, you're maybe 1900, maybe you're kind of feeling down one day. You're like,
days of like having the card in the book though, because you'd be like, I'm the only person that checked this out in the last 5 years.
The more, I kind of sometimes wonder, like, will we have a day like? Well, actually, there's a county system in Kentucky that still has just the cards.
Yeah,
and I kind of thought about that. I'm like, if you don't change long enough, you're going to become the coolest.
Yeah,
because everyone's like, oh, computers are so boring. Yeah. Can I get a record player?
Yeah.
And and I kind of think you're right. You do kind of that, and it was interesting when you went there and you heard that sound of them, stamping due dates, and you're like, kind of getting a little misty here, a little nostalgic. It's like some old school stuff. So yes, that makes perfect sense. It's kind of like being here. You kind of see how things, the way they should be. So.
Yeah, and I have to say, for a while I was trying to hunt down an old like card catalog cabinet because I thought that would be a great thing to store my seeds in. And then I was like, dang, those are expensive. People pay a lot of money for it to have it as like an antique now.
And then having said that, I hear there's a lot of libraries they're doing seed collections.
Oh,
and that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, like
they're taking the old library. Taking a seed library and doing that. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
This was great. Thanks.